Hey everybody, and welcome to April the 9th, 2014 OpenCrowbar Community Planning Meeting. We're planning on today a little preparatory chatting and then reviewing the pull requests that came in over the past sprint, talking about what we're planning on doing, and then getting hopefully a demo and some discussion on the Docker workload nodes that are now one of the core features of OpenCrowbar. I'm trying to pull up here a list of the PRs just so we could go over them quickly, what's new in the code. Over the past week, we've introduced a lot of 2 or 3 very important features. The work shelf support for all you chefs who are writing cookbooks and would like to be able to deploy those cookbooks and their dependencies with Crowbar. It now makes it a lot easier. We're still, this is just initial support for the cookbooks that the Crowbar project is using, but also in the previous sprint and in the upcoming sprint, we're beginning to integrate upstream cookbooks into our work shelf system. There's also initial support for Puppet. Puppet the Jig to allow us to connect to external, to use actually Puppet modules and deploy workloads with Puppet, and also the Puppet client role to add to your node role graph to actually make the deployment of Puppet modules and the use of the Puppet client happen. We've done a bunch of UI cleanup. There were a bunch of bugs that we killed this past sprint, mostly around the UI. The last and most exciting thing is that we can bootstrap Docker nodes. So we'll be demoing that a little later.
We can bootstrap enough Docker modes to show off some of the synchronization things that we still need to fix in the database. So yay.
Cool. Anybody else want to throw in some accomplishments from this past sprint or two? Before we move on to what we're hoping to get done? All right. Cool. Hey, got a lot of folks on the call today. This is cool. At Dell, we're going to be going into our sprint planning tomorrow, and there'll be a few things that we can already anticipate we're going to be working on. Continued work on the Docker stuff. I'll probably be mostly offline due to ChefConf, and a lot of folks are going to be at Red Hat Summit out in San Francisco as well. So not a lot of velocity this sprint for many of us. What do folks anticipate working on who won't be offline?
Well, this is Victor. I'm probably going to be working on fixing those, fixing some of the synchronization issues that we're having in the database, which is pretty much just a consequence of too many things trying to touch the same row on the same table at the same time. And also working on beefing up the Trib model so that when you change the Trib via the API or via the UI, it will automatically schedule all the node roles that either provide or want that attribute to be rerun with the new value.
Yeah, that's a really important feature for being able to deploy roles, different, well, the particulars of a workload that are dependent on each other. So clients can know the correct ports for services, so apps can know what drives are available, and a whole host of all the interdependencies. the workshop support is in its basic form right now, where the cookbooks that are used for our core workload now resolve some of their dependencies by pulling cookbooks from upstream. If you would like to bring your own cookbooks into a Crowbar workload, you can simply just add your cookbook to our centralized Burks file and indicate a Git location or an HTTP download location or a place on disk where to pick up those cookbooks, and they'll be deployable, and they'll be deployed along with all the cookbooks when the chef jig is run. I'm looking to perhaps enhance this to make it clearer and more flexible chef development workflow. I'm really open to ideas. I started documenting some of it out on the docs in the core repository of Crowbar, of OpenCrowbar.
Yeah, Rob and I were doing some talking and thinking along those lines as well yesterday afternoon. And it seems like the biggest unresolved question in development is kind of falls into two lines. First, whenever you're just hacking on a cookbook, how well will Burkshelf deal with needing to make ephemeral forks, like forks that need to last like a Sprinter 3 until we can get changes merged back into the upstream cookbooks if we have any. Kind of ditto for making for deploying admin nodes with local forks instead of using upstreams when we need to on a temporary basis. I don't like having to go in to edit the Burks files manually whenever we have to do that, because we all know that that's going to lead to people forgetting to change things back and hilarity ensuing downstream from that.
Yeah, I haven't
seems to be the only way I can think of to handle that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I haven't seen any capabilities where you could indicate different sources for the same cookbook but at different versions. So version 0.1.5 is local, but 0.2 is upstream. I haven't seen any support for that in Burks 2.0. You could look around in Burks 3.0. Were you thinking of another?
Its documentation is totally hideous, you realize.
Yes. No, the documentation is the code.
Because I mean, in that mind, from that point of view, frankly, I'd prefer just using straight Git to Burkshelf for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And just set up a pattern where we fork all the cookbooks all the time, and that's all we use.
Well,
and use Git for our integration with upstream instead of using Burkshelf directly. Which, of course, has its own drawbacks, because then someone has to remember to keep the stuff up to date, or we have an automated process that does it, and someone has to be responsible for checking to make sure the process doesn't break or jack our changes up, and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, in an effort to not reinvent the wheel, we'll see what Burks 3 is doing. But for now, and for the foreseeable, that centralized Burks file under, say, your workload like core/chef/cookbooks, the Burks file in there is the one true source. And just remember that when Burks install gets called, which is really at bar plant install time, when Burks install gets called, it creates a Burks file.lock. And it's really that Burks file.lock that is determining what gets shipped out. So the particular design for Burkshelf was that the Burks file gets shared with everyone to indicate what larger dependency relationships there are, and the Burks file.lock is is unique to your environment, your series of environments, or the environments that you're collaborating on particular people with. It's not for upstream consumption. So we'll need to tease out sort of a design for worksfile.lock versus different kinds of environments that you'd want to deploy. And potentially working into Crowbar a relationship between deployments and worksfile.lock files, if that's desirable. Not just for which dependencies we're going to resolve and then make available in the Burke shelf, but also which ones we're going to deploy out to our different workload deployments.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of gets me is this is the same sort of problem that this is the same sort of problem that led me to shove the idea of remotes having numerical priorities into the dev tool.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
But I don't want to rewrite the dev tool for OpenCrowbar.
Yeah, well, no, I know that feature is definitely available in Burst 3. The Burst 3 dependency resolver is a separate process that manages the hierarchy or precedence of cookbook sources. So that's definitely in for Burst 3, and we should look at that for our recommendations once Burst 3 is available.
Okay. Yeah, because if you have that, then we can partially solve it just by if you're not making hacks locally on a cookbook, then just don't have a local copy of it. And if we don't need an org specific fork of a cookbook while we are getting bug fixes or features pushed upstream, then we just don't have it. And Burks would just automatically fall back in the order in which we set where we're going to fetch cookbooks from. Which seems like that would mostly solve that problem, but we need to make sure that Burks 3 actually has that functionality.
Yeah, it does. That was part of the design that I heard back in November at Chef Summit. We can also make a lot of this kind of thing happen with the worksfile.lock. Indeed, you have to manage it, but the worksfile.lock will say, okay, for my particular deployment, go local first. And use these particular cookbooks. I don't care what's in the Burke shelf.
Yeah, I just don't like the idea of us expecting every developer to be that savvy and to keep their environment clean. Because my evidence suggests that expecting that will lead to all sorts of fail.
Yeah. All right. Is there any other topics folks want to dig into before we try a Docker container demo? All right. Victor, I imagine you'd be driving this demo because I'm not set up for it.
Yeah, I suppose I can. I'll need to spin up an admin node real quick, and we'll have to do our usual Skype song and dance.
I can do Skype or
it'll have to be Skype.
Google.
Work,
Skype or Gmail are both good for me.
Oh, hang on, I need to get it up on my laptop. Okay. And you want me to just video call you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All right. Okay. As Victor's desktop comes into focus, can folks see what he's doing there? Pretty lossy right now.
Yeah, resizing and moving windows. And spinning up an admin environment.
You can tell by all the equal signs that the rake and the Rails DB migration tasks are happening. Okay, there. Now we're pretty well resolved. Not as lossy anymore. There was, while we're waiting for this, there was an excellent podcast that I listened to earlier this week on my way up from New York City called The Ship Show, and their most recent hour is spent with 3 release engineers, a couple operations guys, and a developer talking about how different ways to use Docker and different ways to using Docker, and they were kind of experimenting with ideas and tossing them around, and it was really interesting to see both the uses that they were putting it to, and also some of the challenges that folks have understanding that Docker isn't just containers. It's not just creating a container, it's also a union file system, which is a layered file system where you can actually ship around layers of a file system from one container to another if they're launched from the same image, share diffs from them. So I was imagining the most recent Heartbleed situation where folks have to upgrade tens of thousands of web servers all at the same time. If they were running in Docker containers, all that literally would need to happen is a small diff of the diff of the container image, just one layer as they call it, could potentially be shipped to all these different web servers pretty darn quickly. With maybe they'd only have to restart the web server process or restart the particular container that held the web server and have the SSL libraries picked up again. It would also allow the OS to not necessarily be patched, but only the container that held the web server needed to be patched. So you could really overlay the new SSL libraries on top of the old ones without changing the underlying operating system, but making the new libraries available to the web servers, reducing your need for potentially rebooting or the temptation to reboot the OS that the web servers are running on.
Okay. And it looks like the admin node is almost up. Once it's up, I'll kick off the Docker slaves. How crazy do you think I should go, Judd? More than 20, I'll start showing off my awesome places where I need to tweak the schema.
I don't know if our audience is prepared for schema violation or transaction issues. Is it the schema that you have to tweak, or just transactionality, or ACID?
It's update and read contention on the same row. That's causing the issues that I'm seeing. So it is really a schema tweak. Mostly because the row in question, the main thing that I'm updating is a gigantic blob that gets pushed, a gigantic blob of JSON that gets pushed straight into Chef. And I need to go back to dynamically generating it on the fly, but in such a way that doesn't cause an exponential slowdown the more nodes we get.
So it sounds like the schema change is actually to remove that from the schema and build the JSON on the fly from schema date elements.
Yeah.
Doesn't Postgres have features that will do this automatically for you? You can request records, request selects to be returned to you in JSON format?
Yes, but I haven't explored them enough to know how to use them. And Postgres has a lot of room for a lot of tweaking as we need it, which is one of the reasons that I moved to it. Okay, that's up. Oh, wrong way. So let's get some containers going on. I'm just waiting for Skype to catch up.
One of the issues with containers is a large enough, well, is IP addressing in general and IP address spacing. Because if you can suddenly have 100, 200 containers on a single machine and you want to address each one independently via IP address, we tend to run out of Class C pretty quick. How are you numbering these?
I've changed the admin range from a /24 to a /22, which should give me space to bump into the 1,000 node kind of design spec with a little bit of tweaking. But anyway, so this is going to launch 20 Docker slaves if all of the API calls go through without running into database synchronization issues. I'm going ahead and creating nodes. In a little bit, we'll see them start popping up in tmux.
You open up a shell to each one in tmux?
I do, yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
So these don't get sledgehammer on them. What's being put in these containers?
On the back end, and I just switched to a container that looks like has already been created and run. So what happens is I wind up I create the node via the API, bind a role called Docker contain or Crowbar Docker node to that node. Then I commit that node, and that is enough to tell the annealer that it needs to do stuff, and it will detect that I want to make a node that needs to transition or make a Docker node. And on the back end, there is a role called provisioner Docker setup that goes in and creates a custom script that contains both the necessary invocation for Docker to wire it up to use our DNS server, make sure that it can make sure that the annealer can or make sure that the network roles can add and remove IP addresses to it, and make sure that it will attach to the right bridge, and then it also contains the init script that I run in the context of the container, and that's what you're seeing in this back scroll right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Docker slave scripts just waits for that script to appear in the tftp boot/node/node name directory, and when it does, it just runs it. And that creates the container and gets everything kicked off.
Which
image
are you using?
Huh?
Which image are you using to create the container?
A custom one right now, based on the Ubuntu image that already has Chef Solo loaded, so we don't have to spend so much time loading it, or we don't have to spend time installing it.
Right. Great.
The script itself doesn't care about that, but if you don't run it on one of our images, it'll be forced to download and install curl and Chef Solo so we can do our things.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's reload this page. Oh, look at all those nodes now. And it looks like they are all going to go through without any problems. Most of them have already finished setting up their initial roles. Oh, let me wait for Skype to catch back up.
Yeah. Wow, look at all them.
Mm-hmm. And there's our 20 nodes. And they've already checked to make sure there's a Chef Solo on the box. They've already wired up their admin network appropriately. Right now I'm having to run the Docker containers in privileged mode to do that. Future releases of Docker will allow me to assign container capabilities on a more fine-grained basis, so I can just switch to letting the containers have capnet admin, so I don't have to give them the full power that privileged implies. And they've set up so that they know how to install software from the repositories that we want them to use. And we have them registered as Crowbar Docker nodes, so that other roles that other downstream roles that need to target a managed or installed system can use Docker nodes.
Cool. What does the OS repo cache node role look like? I see 17 and 18 and 19 are still working. What kind of work is going on there?
I'm just setting up repository metadata on the node.
Oh, and now they're all...
Yeah.
Okay. So these are Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Right, so they'll be talking out to the Ubuntu repositories, package repos.
Yep.
Get all updated and ready
to
download whatever you want into them.
Yeah, pretty much the responsibility of this role is to make sure that the node has the right gmrc, the right proxy settings, make sure that everything's set up to use the proxy that's on the admin node, and make sure that the node has all the references to the right in cluster and upstream package repositories that we wanted to have access to.
All right, anybody in the
and
call
that is my
other question?
Yeah. Right now, the Docker stuff only works when you're running on the same physical machine that the admin container is running on, or the admin node is running on. But that's mostly because I wrote it as it is so that I can do stress testing on the Crowbar core data structures in the database. In the future, we'll flesh it out so it's more full-fledged about being able to spin up Docker nodes if we need that. But right now, it's mostly around just as a proof of concept and a development/testing tool.
yeah, this could really speed up development and testing, especially for all set up to hit external repos. We could be bringing in upstream cookbooks that require upstream packages and start deploying OpenStack or whatever onto these nodes.
Yep. That's one of the reasons I think we're at a state now where it's reasonable to restart work on bringing on the Cloudera and on the OpenStack workloads and bring that under OpenCrowbar.
Mm-hmm. Now I need a blade server for my development machine, and I can run everything on one box.
You don't need a blade server. You just need a laptop with 32 gigs of memory and 8 cores.
No
seriously,
problem.
with Docker nodes, with Docker nodes like this, the most I've ever tried to spin up is about 150, and the only reason that I couldn't do that was because I started running into too much database contention on those on the DNS database, the DHCP database, and the Docker database.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
node roles for the admin node.
My first attempt was pretty good, but future when I actually want those nodes to do something, I'm going to need a little more headroom. But I think at that stage we'll have Docker running on the other nodes as well, Docker containers.
Well,
so.
probably. I mean, Docker's not going to be suited for all the workloads we want to run, but it's definitely well suited for certain workloads, and it's a very good way for me to stress out the Crowbar crow to make sure that it can scale to being able to manage 1,000 nodes effectively.
Well, if one of our use cases is to just work on Hadoop deployment and not necessarily load a lot of data into Hadoop or Cloudera, aren't Docker nodes the moral equivalent, as long as you don't need a special file system? Oh.
No, because HDFS.
Yeah, the file system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking into that as this stuff kind of matures, but not sure how we're going to implement that. It may or may not make sense to run some of the Hadoop workloads inside containers, but the file system gets a little tricky with HDFS.
Anything that doesn't need direct access to physical devices like HDFS, we could probably spin it up to run in a Docker node, no problem. But anything that like a Swift storage node or a Cinder storage node or a Ceph OSD node, all of those have to effectively run on physical hardware because they need to essentially be able to take over a hard drive. And you could work around that by pre-formatting file systems and by mounting them into the container. But at that point, it's just kind of not really worth the effort because you have to customize the container so much to map what you would expect the physical hardware to be able to present to it.
Could we use a mix of virtual machines and containers?
So you're getting into some of the stuff that's keeping me awake at night, but there are some things we can potentially do there. I'm more focused on right now kind of making sure the basic infrastructure is there, but mixes of virtual containers come into play. Also, interaction with the new MapReduce Yarn scheduler might come into play here. So
yeah,
I'll stop at that stage. I don't want to keep thinking out loud, but there's some stuff we can do here.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could do. The question is, should we?
Exactly. And
yeah,
I need to do a little bit of testing to figure out what the trade-offs are. I don't think it'll be a yes, no. I think it'll be there are cases where we do want to do this.
If there's a way to flag roles as compatible with one of the three types, bare metal, one or more of the three types of bare metal container or virtual machine, we could put together, it could be a general purpose tool to give us the freedom to experiment.
We don't have that yet, and I don't know that the added complexity of doing that for a .0 release will be worth it, quite honestly.
Sure.
That's one of the things that I'm not going to add until there's a convincing, business-driven use case to add.
Yeah, that's
because that actually adds a fair amount of complexity to the dependency graph.
Yeah, and I'm thinking much further down the road. So for the capabilities we have right now, this will let us test a lot of the stuff we need to test pretty easily. Which automation is a big part of the focus right now, just to be able to spin this stuff up and verify that it works. But further down the road, there are some interesting things we can definitely do.
Yeah, and just for doing smoke test workloads, if they can run comfortably in a Docker container without much modification, Docker is a pretty good way to do that sort of thing. Like if we could spin up a complete, Nova cluster inside of containers without having to modify the upstream cookbooks to special case it enough so that it's not really an accurate test anymore, then yeah, it'll be great for that sort of thing.
Yeah, and believe it or not, that's actually a lot easier to do in Hadoop than OpenStack, because
Hadoop has a lot fewer moving parts.
Well, actually, it has a lot more moving parts, but they're all encapsulated inside JVMs. So in a lot of cases, Hadoop is already containerized in the JVM to a large extent. That's not 100% true, but most of the core Hadoop stuff is.
I say it has fewer moving parts in the sense that it doesn't try to provide a generalized block store, generalized distributed file system, a generalized scheme for doing software-defined networking, a generalized scheme for doing identity management. There's a lot of stuff it doesn't do that OpenStack does, because OpenStack wants to be the be-all and end-all of your one-stop cloud shop there. And Hadoop doesn't do that, so it's much narrower in scope of what it provides, and therefore there's less stuff you have to worry about coordinating.
Looks good, though. It's come along quite a ways in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, this is really awesome stuff. I'm having a particular problem because I am bandwidth challenged. If I want to take a new image of my running Docker admin node, should I just wait the 10 minutes every time? And B, if so, how? Like, what is the best way? I thought you had a, restore Pristine or something script.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just running that and then committing the image?
Basically. Or spin up a new Docker admin using the Pristine update target, and then committing that image. But I mean, with the way the recipe works, that I don't know how much that will gain you, because that's designed to be kind of global. It's only really designed to be able to do a Pristine update, then push that image back out to the upstream, back out to the outside world, and everyone uses it there.
So if I were to move the external push from Pristine?
Well, you still have to update your Docker admin to tell it to use the new image you just created.
That's fine.
And you have to maintain that change locally.
Yeah, I can Docker RMI when I don't like that particular layer.
It's
cool.
Not the Docker RMI part that I care about. It's you've modified your Docker admin script and you forgot to change it back before you do a push or before you do a pull request.
Yes. Well, that's what private branches are all about.
Yeah, it's just remembering to do that and, making sure that it doesn't leak back.
Yeah. Well,
and therefore break everyone else.
Origin for me is my repo, is my organization in GitHub. I kind of can't make the mistake of pushing the wrong thing. Got to come through pull request.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way I work too.
But not everyone pays attention to the full contents of the pull request. Hell, even I have just been known to glaze over parts that I don't consider important.
Yeah, you don't pull request as a branch that has your private stuff in it. No. And don't work in master. Do not work in master.
I mean, the other alternative would be to find a better ISP or internet cafe.
Yeah.
Because I know that's real easy out where you live.
Yeah, if I could get cable or FiOS or even decent DSL where I live. I can't even get DSL. I'm too far from the CO. So I got to go looking again.
You should do what they do on Wall Street and get yourself a nice microwave relay.
Yeah. And I like fried bird, Fried bird is nice. I'll just drop off the roof of my house. Yeah, microwave relays are great. Also, this point-to-point Wi-Fi works. I'm in a valley, and I'd need to set up a tower and shoot Wi-Fi down into my, down towards my house.
Get a co-op going amongst your neighbors who are in similar straits.
Yeah. No, I want to do municipal Wi-Fi, but I'm afraid of ISPs because the incumbent ISPs really have a stranglehold. And if have been recent court cases where municipalities are forbidden from competing with ISPs, even if the ISPs do not provide service in that area.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's time to not do Muni Wi-Fi, but do a nonprofit Wi-Fi or something like that.
Nonprofit is also an excellent way to go, and purchase and string up fiber optics, rent space on the power company's telephone poles, and string up fiber. I'd love to do that. In my area, actually, I have a lot of retired Verizon and Bell Atlantic people.
That's the plan.
So,
well,
yeah, that means they know the score already. So,
yep.
But we've stopped talking about Crowbar.
Yeah, we're way afield on Crowbar. But those are so. If you are bandwidth challenged or you want to create your own Docker images of our admin node, those are kind of the issues that you'd be running into. Any more questions from folks farther afield? Comments? Criticisms? We have thick skin. All right. So it looks like we'll wrap it up here. Thanks, everybody, for climbing on board. Our Docker demo and reviewing what we're up to, and we look forward to a design call next week. Actually, there probably won't be a design call next week because of the Red Hat Summit and ChefConf, but we'll catch up the week following on April the 23rd. Thanks for calling in.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.